Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. I'm on my Spyder. I'm just riding around Goulburn with no particular place to go, and I'm going to talk about the road toll in this video. And while I'm talking about the road toll, I'll be mentioning roads and the state of the roads at some point, so it's probably a good idea while you're watching and listening to have a look at some of the roads that I ride on, and perhaps the points I make about the state of the road, which will be later in the video, will make more sense and have more meaning for you then. I should, before I go any further, be absolutely clear that I am not a road safety expert. I'm not an expert or have any expertise or knowledge of road trauma or those sorts of issues. I don't know anything about road design or traffic management or engineering or any of those sort of things. I'm just a person who's read a couple of articles about the road toll in the last couple of days. I'm out riding my motorcycle and I thought I would share my thoughts on the road toll. As usual, you're welcome to respond in the appropriate place in the video. When I become aware of those comments, I will respond to them. Please respond to the content of the video, and I'll be happy to respond to your comments. And I'm happy for you to offer an opinion which is different from mine. I welcome people's disagreement. I'm just saying let's focus on the content. Now, the other thing I should say at the beginning is that road deaths, road injuries from road accidents and so on is a very serious matter. If somebody you know or yourself has been involved in a road accident, you know that it can be quite a traumatic incident. If somebody dies, of course it's traumatic. If somebody's injured, they can be injured sometimes catastrophically. And those are very serious matters, and I don't want to in any way suggest they're not. I'm just a person here talking about road safety issues and the road toll related issues, and I'm not trying to downplay the significance of injuries or accidents or anything like that. Alright, with all that said, I'm prompted to make this video because I saw and I read an article in the newspaper a day or two ago that said that the Federal Office of Road Safety, along with the State Ministers of Transport, had been working since 2018. This is, by the way, December 2025 when I'm making this video. So they've been working since 2018, so for 7 years, on a proposal, a plan, an idea that they would reduce the speed limit on unsigned rural roads from 100 kilometres to 80 kilometres. Now, unsigned rural roads are roads where there are no signs indicating what the speed limit is. They are generally C-class or worse roads. You're familiar with the A, B and C class of roads, and they would be the 1 or 2 star roads, and I'll explain about that 1 or 2 stars in a moment, or a little later in the video. So they generally would be the very poor country rural roads rather than the major highways or major roads connecting major centres. And the idea was that the speed limit is generally, unless it's otherwise stated, 100 kilometres an hour, but there was going to be reduced to a blanket 80 kilometres an hour. And the reason that was suggested was because those roads were in such a poor state that it was felt that at 100 kilometres they were no longer safe, and so the speed limit needed to be reduced to 80. Now, there were objections raised by truck drivers who said, well, that's going to reduce my productivity because it's going to take me longer to get from A to B, moving my freight, and that's not good for the economy. I wonder how many truck drivers are driving on 1 or 2 star roads, but that's certainly a valid point that they make. A second point was made by people in rural communities, and particularly farmers, but also others in rural communities, who said, well, if I have to travel on these rural roads between my farm and the shops or the town where I work or live or whatever, and I have to travel, I normally travel at 100 and you're going to reduce that to 80, it's going to take me longer to get there and back home again, which means I'm going to spend more time away from my family, and I don't want to do that. That is a valid point. A third point was raised by the NRMA, which said, well, if these roads are in such a poor state that you say they're unsafe at 80 kilometres, at 100 kilometres an hour, rather than reduce the speed limit, why don't you fix the road? And of course that is a valid point. The governments of all persuasions would say, well, ideally we'd love to fix all those roads, but we just don't have enough money to fix them all, so let's just reduce the speed limit and make them safer. But okay, so it was in that context that I decided to make this video about the road toll. I should say at this stage that I think that as a general thing, driving is a pretty safe activity. There are something like 17 million light vehicles registered in Australia. So those are the vehicles that most of us drive. So that includes the light commercial vehicles, the 4x4 utes and large SUVs and all the other passenger vehicles that people drive. So there are 17 million of those vehicles registered in Australia. If we assume that for every one of those vehicles there is one licence holder, that means there are 17 million licence holders. But of course in many cases there are more, that there's 2, perhaps even 3 people in a family who hold driver's licences, even if there's only one vehicle in the household, and they all drive the same vehicle. So there could be more than 17 million licence holders, but there are at least, as an estimate I would say, 17 million licence holders. So if we were to look at the 17 million licence holders and divide that into the number of kilometres travelled by Australians in any given year, which would be in the billions, I would imagine, I think that if we were to look at road deaths per kilometres travelled or something like that, driving is a pretty safe activity. Having said that, the road toll in 2024 for all of Australia was 1,294 and something like 30,000 injuries in 2024. And it looks like 2025 is on target, unfortunately, for a higher toll this year. In fact, it looks like it's going to be the highest road toll since 2009. So if we look at the road toll and say, well, it's been falling progressively for a very long time, not in staggering numbers or dramatic numbers, but every year there's been a steady decline in the road toll, and that was the case up until COVID. And then when the COVID years struck and people were not allowed to drive and they weren't going to work, and even the weekend drive was out, going to the shack, as they say in Tasmania, was even prohibited. The road toll fell dramatically because people just weren't driving, they were at home all the time. So when the restrictions were lifted and everybody was back on the road and back at work and so on, the road toll went up again. But it's been climbing every year since then. So since 2022 or thereabouts, the road toll has increased every year. So 23, 24 and 25, the road toll has been higher every year. And that would be despite people saying, well, we've got more police presence, we've got more higher fines, tougher penalties, cars are safer now than they've ever been. They're not the safest they've ever been or will ever be, but they're safer than they've ever been. We still have a rising road toll. So I thought I would talk about some of the factors that may have an influence on the road toll and people's driving behaviour. And as I say, I'm not an expert and I'm not suggesting that I am. I'm just talking about these issues, and you can take my thoughts whatever way you like. The first one, I think, not in any order of importance, but the first factor that has an influence on the road toll, I think, is the weather. We have no control over the weather, but if you look at today, for example, when I'm riding my Spyder, it's overcast, but it's a pretty clear day. Visibility is quite good. I can see a long way in front of myself, and therefore I can confidently travel at 100 kilometres an hour if the road is signposted for 100 kilometres an hour. If it was gloomy and overcast, gloomy and visibility wasn't as good, I would have to adjust my driving behaviour accordingly. If I was driving at night, no matter how many lights I have on my bike, and my bike is very well lit, I would have to adjust my driving behaviour again, especially if I was driving on some of these roads that I'm going to be on today, because wildlife is prone to jump out of on those roads in the middle of the night. If it was heavy rain, I would have to adjust my driving behaviour again. So whilst we can't influence the weather should and does influence the way we drive and our driving behaviours when we're on the road. The second factor has to do with the vehicle that you drive. Individually, you are responsible for maintaining your vehicle in a roadworthy manner. If you live in New South Wales and your car is more than 5 years old, every year when you go to register it, you have to have it inspected to determine that it is roadworthy. And whilst that roadworthy inspection, the certificate they give you is only valid for 30 days, at least for 30 days a year, you know that your vehicle is roadworthy. The other way to maintain its roadworthiness, of course, is to make sure that it's regularly serviced, and so that when the brakes start to feel a bit spongy, you get something done about it. the police in all states, as I would understand, have the capacity to determine your vehicle is unroadworthy. If they pull you over for a breath test or whatever, look at your vehicle and decide you've got bald tyres or something like that, they can declare your vehicle unroadworthy at the time. So you have a responsibility as an individual to maintain your vehicle in a roadworthy manner. As a nation, we have the capacity to say at any stage we want to see a certain feature in a car that we think will add to the safety of that car. For example, we did that when we said all cars sold in Australia have to have seatbelts. We said it again when we said all cars sold in Australia have to have head restraints so that no one gets a whiplash injury. We have say that cars in Australia sold in Australia must have crumple zones. Although it's not required by Australian design rules, in order to get a 5-star ANCAP rating, it is said that the vehicle must have a suite of active and passive driver assistance things, including autonomous emergency braking, adaptive cruise control, and various other things like that, that ANCAP say add to the safety of the vehicle. Although if those things have been in cars for a number of years now and the road toll is rising, then maybe there's a question about whether they do or don't. I suspect it's more to do with the distraction of having to find that feature in the screen and enable it or disable it than the feature itself. So that factor 2 is the vehicle you drive. Factor 3 is you, the driver. As an individual, you are required to drive according to the law and road rules. Even if you don't know the law and road rules, ignorance of the law is never an excuse. So if a new road rule is passed and you're unaware of it, that's not ever going to be an excuse. So you're expected to obey the road rules and you're expected to obey the signs that you see on the road, the speed limit signs and no right turns and all that sort of stop signs and things like that. You know as a driver that you're not supposed to drive when your ability to drive is impaired by alcohol, and there's a limit on how much alcohol you're allowed to have. You know that you shouldn't drive your car while you are under the influence of anything else, illegal or illegal substances that may impair your judgment. And in some cases, it's not the impairment, it's the fact that the substance is illegal. You know that you shouldn't drive your vehicle if you are in a bad mood, or you've had an argument with your partner or an argument with your boss at work, because you're likely to go out and do impulsive or dangerous or foolish things that result in road rage and could result in serious accidents or even death. So as an individual, you have certain responsibilities when you're on the road to drive in a safe manner and make sure that you are fit and capable of driving your vehicle according to the laws and rules and regulations that are appropriate in your state. As a nation, we have a graded licence system which includes a learner's permit, a red provisional licence, a green provisional licence, and then a full licence. And when you're on those provisional licences, there are restrictions on the speed at which you can drive. There are restrictions on the hours that you can drive. In other words, you can't be out after a certain period at night. There's a curfew that is applicable there. There is a restriction on the number of people who can be in your vehicle, and there is also a restriction on the vehicles that you can drive. There's a long list of high performance and turbocharged and so forth vehicles that you simply cannot drive. So the authorities probably think they've got a pretty good system there in terms of driver education and licensing for people to do their best in that regard to reduce the road toll. So we have those three factors, and then there is this fourth factor, which is the state of the road. Again, it's something as an individual we cannot do anything about. Collectively, like the NRMA says, well, why don't you just fix the road? But the argument might be, first of all, that the government says, well, we don't have enough money to fix all the roads, and if we spent all the money we did have fixing roads, we would have to stop doing certain other things. And one of our problems as a nation, I don't want to get too political here because it does create it is such a divisive issue, is it? Sometimes people say, well, we want more money spent on this, but we don't want you to stop spending money on that thing over there either. So we want you to keep doing that. We also want more money spent on this. And thirdly, we don't have to pay any more taxes for it. So somewhere there's this idea that there's a magic pudding you can just keep pulling money out of and spending money fixing things without it being a cost that ultimately we as the taxpayer have to pay. But let's now talk about the state of the roads and the way roads are assessed and so on. As I mentioned earlier, in Australia we have the major highways, and then we have these A, B and C roads. New South Wales, to my knowledge, was the last state to adopt such a system. It had been in use in other states for a long time, and I find it's a very helpful system, because if you're looking at travelling from one point to another, you can see, well, this is an A road or a B road or a C road or whatever it is. And a C road you're generally going to know is a road similar to this one. No markings, no signposting, no or very few markings. The shoulder's not very good. There might not be any pickets on the road to mark the edge of the road and so on. So it's a country road like this one. And if there's an alternate route that's an A or a B road, which is a better maintained road with more safety barriers and better markings and so on and so forth, then you might want to take that. If you like the scenic route, you might want to take the C road. So we have this system of labelling roads. So there's the A38 or the B88 or the C325 or something like that, because there are lots and lots of little country roads all over the place. But also there's a way of rating roads in Australia on a star system, with 1 star being the lowest. I should imagine that's like a dirt road or a goat track that goes up to somebody's property off a road, to 5 stars, which obviously is the best. Now for a context, a 3-star road means it's a dual carriageway, divided dual carriageway with a barrier down the middle. So if you're familiar with the Federal Highway, for example, going from Goulburn to Canberra, that would be probably considered a 3-star road, because it's a dual carriageway. There is a barrier, which is a wide strip of land with cable barriers on the sides, or those Armco railings on the sides. So you, in theory, can't cross over and have a head-on collision with traffic coming the other way. So there are barriers. A divided road, which is a dual carriageway, in other words, more than two or more lanes going in the same direction. It also has wide shoulders, and then is what is termed modern safety features. Now, I'm not exactly sure what those modern safety features are, because they're not detailed, but New South Wales has a plan to say that by 2030, which is 5 years away, 80% of all roads in New South Wales should be 3 stars or more. At the moment, 71% of roads in New South Wales are 3 stars or more. So they've got 9% of roads to deal with in the intervening 5 years between now and 2030. And this is all now no doubt under the auspices of the Towards Zero campaign that every state has been running since 2022 and runs through until 2031. Now, the idea of that isn't to say that we're going to get down to 0 road deaths, because that simply isn't realistic. No matter how many pieces of legislation we would pass and how severe the penalties are, and how good the driver education programs are, we're still dealing with human beings. And we're still dealing with people who will, unfortunately, drive when they shouldn't, because they're intoxicated, or because they're under the influence of something they shouldn't be under the influence of, or because they're in a bad mood and they think they'll go out and have a drive and it'll clear their head, but they will then do something impulsive, or speed through a red light, or fail to give way at a give way sign, or ignore a stop sign, or something like that. Or even other people who do none of those things, who don't drink and drive, don't drive while they're angry or anything like that. They'll be in the car and there'll be a moment or two of distraction because there's a child in the back of the car screaming for some reason or other, and the person looks over their shoulder to see what the issue is, and they're distracted from the road, and then a collision will occur. Or they've taken their eyes off the road to adjust the volume of the car, and they've got to do the radio because they've got to do that through the screen, or they've got to turn off a particular beeping noise that they don't like, and their eyes are off the road, and there's going to be an accident. So with the best of intentions, we are never going to get down to 0 road deaths. The plan is to reduce the road toll to what is considered to be a sustainable, and these are the language of the proposal, to what is a sustainable level. No one says what that is, but if we were to say, for example, we've had a 25% reduction in the road toll, would that be an acceptable figure? Would a 25% reduction on 1,294 deaths in 2024, would that be an acceptable figure? So we have to accept that there are going to be some deaths, but significantly less, 25% less, let's say, than there were in the previous year and so on. So there is this towards zero strategy that says there's a number of things we need to do, but one of the biggest things we need to do is improve the infrastructure, that is the roads that people drive on. So I'm talking about these 1 and 2 star roads. They would be roads with no markings down the middle of them, so you don't know which side. There's no clear delineation that this is the left and the right hand side of the road. There would be no safety barriers on the sides of the road, maybe even those pickets, the little white sticks that are plastic or metal or wood sometimes that show you where the edge of the road is. Maybe they're not even there. There are no signs on the road to say what the speed limit is. There are none of those yellow speed advisory signs that, say to you, well, there's a curve coming up and we're recommending you take it at 75 kilometres an hour, which is different from the sign that says this is the speed limit. The maximum you can drive on this road is 80 kilometres an hour. The towards zero plan is to say, well, we've got to improve the infrastructure. So we've got to have less of these 1 and 2 star roads and more roads that are at least 3 stars or more. Now, in our major capital cities, and the ones that I'm familiar with, that would be Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and to a lesser extent Hobart, there are lots of roads that probably would qualify, probably not so many in Hobart, but certainly Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, where they have motorways, and in particular in Sydney and Melbourne, endless tollways, that certainly those roads would qualify as 5-star roads. They have 3 or 4 or more lanes all going in the same direction in a dual carriageway with a concrete barrier that clearly separates the two directions, so there's no possibility of you crossing the concrete barrier and having a head-on collision with someone coming the other way. There are either those steel Armco barriers down the left-hand side of the road, or there are those wire safety barriers. There are clear signs all along the road indicating any potential hazards. There is either signs that say what the speed limit is, or those flashing ones that say if everything's blacked out, the speed limit's 80 or 100 or whatever it is. It's quite clear to you all the time what it is that's supposed to be happening on that road. This road here that I'm on at the moment, for example, you can see the shoulder on the left-hand side is pretty wide. There are markings down the middle of the road that indicate which side of the road is your side, which is the left-hand side, the lanes and so on, but it's a single road in each direction. There would be a sign somewhere along here indicating the speed limit, but because it's in a built-up area, it would be 50 kilometres an hour. So the towards zero initiative is to say we're going to try and improve the infrastructure, we're going to try and improve the roads, but there are some roads, for example, that it would just not be realistic and practical to say, well, let's say, for example, should every road in Australia be a minimum of 3 stars? Well, it's saying that in New South Wales the goal is that by 2030 80% of the roads in New South Wales will be 3 stars. But there are some roads that I've ridden on here today in this video where if they have half a dozen cars travel on them in a day, that's a good day. Some days there'll be maybe one or 2 cars, or maybe there won't be any cars travelling on that road that day. So realistically, is it a good use of the taxpayer dollar to say, well, we're going to make that road into a 3-star road? It would be ideal to say, let's make it a road that is properly sealed. There are no potholes. There are no patches on patches, so the surface is smooth. There is a shoulder, so if you have to pull off the road, you are safe from the traffic coming behind you. Especially if you're on a motorcycle, you kick down your stand, you step off, and you generally step off on the road side of the bike. So the shoulder is sufficiently wide that you can get off the bike safely. But does it make sense to turn that road into a 3-star road? Perhaps not. It certainly doesn't make it any sense to turn it into a 5-star road because it doesn't have enough traffic on it to justify the cost. At a point in time, once upon a time, all of the revenue collected from fuel tax was allegedly spent on maintaining roads. At some point in the past, the government's decided to stop telling us that fiction and just said, well, what we do with fuel tax is we throw it into general revenue, and road funding and road repair and so on is done from general revenue. Now, one of the issues that we have in Australia with any issue that is the responsibility of government is we have this issue of passing the buck, passing the costs and blaming other people. And that's because we have these three levels of government. The federal government has lots of money. They have lots of money because they have the most taxing, they have the taxing powers. They have the powers taxing corporations and of income taxing. So most of the revenue that comes in goes into Commonwealth coffers. So they have the buckets of money. The state government has money that they collect through stamp duty and various other charges and things like that, property taxes, and they also obtain all the revenue from the GST. And then there is your local council that obtains its revenue through rates, both from you as a homeowner and any business that's in your town or local government area, and they get grants from the state and federal government. So the federal government puts money towards the maintenance of major road projects, such as those that create dual carriageways on highways between capital cities. For example, the funding of the Pacific Highway dual carriageway from Sydney to Brisbane, most of that funding is being borne by the Commonwealth government. In the last federal election campaign, if I recall correctly, the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced something like $800 million in funding to upgrade the Bruce Highway, which is the highway that runs north of Brisbane towards the northern part of Queensland. So the federal government has this bucket of money, and it puts its money towards major highway improvements and developments, duplications of the Hume Highway, for example, of the Pacific Highway. They were one of the major funders of the federal highway duplication around Lake George and so on. The state government, it has responsibility for a bunch of roads in and around its state, such as the roads that might connect major centres but are not considered major highways. And then there is the local government, which has responsibility for maintaining the roads within the township and perhaps within the local government area, but in some cases may receive federal or state government funding to do so. As an example, here in Goulburn, the Crookwell Road, or Fitzroy Street as it's called in the urban area of Goulburn, but once it crosses the Marsden Bridge becomes the Crookwell Road. It was a responsibility of the Goulburn Mulwaree Council and Upper Lachlan Council. In a deal negotiated between those two councils and the state government, the part of the road that is in the Goulburn Mulwaree Council area, at least, the Goulburn Mulwaree Council said, well, look, we will take over responsibility for maintaining Auburn Street, which is the main street in Goulburn, since it's only 2 lanes now and it's mostly local traffic. We will maintain that road if you will take on the responsibility of maintaining Fitzroy Street in the Crookwell Road. And after some back and forth and negotiation and so on, the government agreed to that. What that would possibly mean is that the Goulburn Mulwaree Council would still do the repairs to the Crookwell Road, but they would receive funding from the state government to do so rather than have to pay for it out of their own rates revenue. And that's an important matter for them because they're saying, well, there's lots of traffic on that road now, people coming into Goulburn from Crookwell and from the areas out there that aren't ratepayers in Goulburn but are causing wear and tear on this road because they're coming in for work. And as a consequence of that, that's a strain on the budget of the Goulburn Mulwaree Council they ought not to bear, because it's now and so anyway, the state government agreed to that measure, and so the Goulburn Mulwaree Council is required now to maintain the road Auburn Street, which is the main road in Goulburn, and the Fitzroy Street Crookwell Road is maintained by the Commonwealth or by the state government, but perhaps it funds the local council. So that's what I'm saying about various levels of responsibility. People saying, well, it's a road in our district, but it's not our road. We don't own it. It's a trunk road that connects this locality with that locality, and therefore it's not a local government responsibility, it's a state government responsibility. And the state government would say something like, well, there's 3 men and a dog drive on that road every day. There's no way that we can justify spending a lot of money to upgrade a road that hardly anybody uses when we've got this other road over somewhere else that has thousands of cars on it every day that does need upgrading. Obviously, a reduction in the road toll is going to have a lot of benefits. It's going to have the benefit of people's lives are going to be saved. People who are at the moment catastrophically injured are not going to be catastrophically injured. People who might end up otherwise with severe impairments, by either physical or head injuries, brain damage or so on, are not going to have those issues if we reduce the road toll. Clearly, if we reduce the road toll, it's going to have a reduction. It's going to lead to a reduction in health costs, because somebody's admitted to hospital after a road accident and somebody has to pay for all of that, whether it's the green slip insurer in New South Wales, or the Traffic Accidents Commission in Victoria, or the MAIB, the Motor Accident Insurance Board in Tasmania, or the equivalent of it in your state. Somebody is still paying those health costs, whether it's your private health fund or it's the insurance company that gave us the green slip for your vehicle. Somebody is paying those health costs, and if somebody is paying those health costs, in order to recoup those costs, you can be pretty certain that your premium, whether it's for your green slip or your health insurance, is going to go up. It's going to increase. Obviously, if there is a reduction in the road toll, there's going to be less people in hospital for road injury accidents and road injuries and injuries from road accidents and so on, and therefore there's going to be beds available in hospital for people who need them for other purposes, for other operations or other illnesses and so on, rather than those beds being taken up by people who have been injured in road accidents. When there's a road accident and somebody's injured, there may be, if they're travelling to and from work or something, there may be a workers' compensation claim involved, and again that's going to be a cost that's borne by somebody, but also that means that person isn't working and either the job they are doing isn't getting done, or somebody else is now doing it, but the fact that that job might not be getting done, even for a short period of time while they work out, well, how do we replace this person at work and so on, has an impact on the economy, and that has costs that are borne by all sorts of people as well. So it's in our interests as a society to keep more people alive and keep more people safe on the roads. It's in our interests from that humane point of view. It's in our interests as a society from an economic point of view to say, let's see if we can reduce the road toll and reduce health costs, reduce insurance costs, reduce lost production in the economy while people are off work recovering from road accidents and so on. What have we got? What can we do all about this? So the takeaways from this thing are there are 4 factors that influence the road toll. The weather, as I said, over which you have no control. Your behaviour as a driver, which you have control over. The quality of your motor vehicle, the standard at which you maintain your vehicle and making sure it's roadworthy and so forth. And then the state of the roads. Now, the state of the roads, you might say, well, I don't have any control over that. I'm just a taxpayer and I don't have any control over that. But if we collectively say, as a nation, when it comes to elections and things like that, or to our local members of parliament, be they state or federal, or even our local councillors, we want something done about the roads, and we lobby hard enough and long enough and continuously about it, then perhaps that would happen. But we also have to bear in mind that if that does happen, that either a couple of things could happen. One is that the various authorities who fix the roads will say, well, we can fix all the roads and make all the roads perfectly safe, but in order to do so, we're going to have to stop doing this thing over here. And if we say, no, we don't want you to stop doing that thing, we want you to do that thing over there, and we want you to make the roads better as well, then the governments, local government, state government, federal government are going to come to us and say, well, we need more money. And the only way they're going to get more money is if you pay more tax. And if we don't want to pay more tax, then we have to understand that there are certain priorities that governments have, Whilst I'm not saying the roads aren't a priority, they're saying, well, we're prepared to put a certain amount of money every year into roads and no more than that, because that's all we can afford if we want to do health and education and defence and police and whatever else, all the other things that we do and that you want us to do. All right, well, those are all my thoughts about the road toll. If you have an opinion about any of the things that I've said, please feel free to comment. As I said at the beginning of the video, please comment on the content. If you disagree with my views about any of the things that I've said, I'm happy to hear your opinion and I'm happy to engage in conversation about them. We don't know each other, so let's not make any assumptions about people's political leanings or anything like that. Let's just comment on what it is I've had to say here. Have a good day. Whenever you're watching this, if you're out riding, ride safely, wear your safety gear, stay alert. If you are driving a car, stay alert. Have a look around and be aware that there are motorcyclists on the road. Check your mirrors twice before you make any manoeuvres. And let's hope that everybody gets to where they have to go and back home again safely, and that nobody that watches this video experiences any form of road trauma, be it minor bingle with a cosmetic damage to the bike and a scratch on themselves, or something more serious. Thanks for watching. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you when I'm making the next motorcycle video, whenever that may be.